Yep.
Okay. You're listening to Word Talk with Click, Scribble, and Scrawl, the Stetit cousins, where even in the script notes you'll never see, we use the serial comma. How's everybody today?
Good.
Do we have anybody right off with a question? If not, I'll tell you mine.
Well, tell us yours
Why don't
first.
we, yeah, we'll start with yours, Steve, and I'll try to line someone up.
I'm on chapter 10 of current Vlad novel, and as some of you know, it's a very, very long series, and I am caught right now with I'm working toward the last four, toward the final volume, toward finishing it off and tying it off neatly. And there's the issue of introducing new stuff early in the timeline that's never mentioned previously in all of the books. Now, I set up a cheat on that a long time ago.
Yeah, you're backspackling there, right? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And I did set up a cheat. I I put in the thing about the memory stuff, about my protagonist having had his memories screwed with, not so much to retcon anything I'd done before as in case I needed to do this. Yeah. But I'd kind of rather not. And so this is sort of a general thing about where do you draw the line in consistency, and what are some ways to play around with that sort of thing. Is that clear enough? Is the question making sense, or do I have to get specific?
I think so. I mean, as much as you ever make sense, yes. So what you're saying is you've got a thing that has to happen in your story or your story doesn't happen. And it's in the past and you haven't said it before.
Correct. And it's a big enough thing that it ought to have come up.
So your character isn't able to just say, oops, I forgot that bit where like my family died and I was like crippled by a horse.
Right.
And you can't.
No, I sort of can say that because I did kind of set it up, but it's something I'd rather not do if I can avoid it.
Can you put it in as an introduction?
Explain.
Well, you've got a certain amount of freedom in the structure that you've chosen. That you basically have 17 chapters, but do you always have an introduction with the Vlad books, or does that depend?
I usually do preface and analog and epilogue.
Okay,
but not always.
Yeah, but you would have room to do something different with your preface that you're not doing with the main story. So this information could go into the preface.
No, it's too much a part of the plot, but on the other hand, I could do it the other way around and and maybe come up with a frame that accounts for why it hasn't come up so far. That's kind of that's not a bad idea.
I think one of the things that you can do is figure out, okay, is there a reason why it has been impossible to bring up before this? State secrets, evil magic, Seth Levode thought it would be bad for everybody.
That last one is a really actually appropriate, that would fit very nicely because she might well think it was really bad for everybody and have told him, don't talk about this.
Well, one of the nice things about your narrator is he's not we trust him to be telling us what he believes is important, but we don't trust him to be telling it in order, or we expect him to be a little whimsical with the information that he gives us. You know, so you can get away with things that a more conventional narrator wouldn't allow for.
Also, part of the problem, part of the fun with this book, this book is set way early in Vlad's timeline, and it's both the events happen early and it's narrated early, which means this is before Caudy sat him down and made him read books.
Huh.
So his narrative voice is more like it was in Jureg and Yendi. And then he, gradually becomes more sophisticated as a speaker, is one of the games I'm playing. And this is getting to go back earlier. And that gives me maybe an opportunity to play with something there.
Okay, if you're actually telling, if the story is actually being told earlier on, it's certainly not unreasonable that this would be the first time that this particular weird incident came up.
Yeah.
And you've got the opportunity to account for why it hasn't come up again previously. Again. Did you have to write these things in out of order? Really? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but you can put the reason why it never comes up again in this story, because the reason why is very, very early. And honestly, I like blaming Seth or LaVode. I think that's a good plan.
I do too. I think that is perfect. And with the thing that it is, it fits perfectly.
Okay, so everyone who thinks we blame Seth or LaVode, say aye. All right, excellent. So next up, we're going to have a question from Joe, who I am attempting to
Hi, Joe.
Okay, Joe, blame Seth or LaVode.
Yeah, I think if anyone would vote aye to blame Seth or LaVode, I think it would be Vlad. So that makes perfect sense to me.
Did you have a question, Joe, about a story of yours?
I did have a question about a story.
You have a question about a story of mine. We can do any of them, really.
I've got a question about. I've got a story that when I started writing it, it felt like it was a military science fiction book. And then halfway through it went, no, this is a spy thriller, which was fun. And I like that it did that, but how do you, in order to embed a genre change, get a reader ready for that? Or do you need to get a reader ready for that? Or do you just dive into that almost second atmosphere of the story?
Two questions.
A delightful question.
Yeah. The first
good one. Oh, yeah. Start us off with a really good one, Joe, and nobody's going to be able to top that one now. What are we going to do?
Yeah. Do you have a first-person narrator, or is it?
Yes, this is a first-person and told from like a this has already happened point of view.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
I think Will is the perfect person to answer this because Will specializes in critiques that go, this is a really good story. I think what you want to do is change it to third person, switch the point of view, set it on the moon, and make it a time travel story, and you'll have it.
No, you forgot, and you have to cut the character's arm off.
Right. Oh, and cut the character's arm off and give everybody a sex change.
I actually already cut the arm off and most of the face, so I've got that down.
You've got the George Lucas special in already. Good job.
Yeah.
Okay, so Will, take it away.
Yeah. No, my inclination actually is not to change anything, and essentially to surprise the reader when the narrator is surprised. This is.
Unless the narrator is not surprised.
What?
Unless the narrator is not surprised.
Yeah, well, this is another of those point of view solves everything questions. In that if it comes up, if the change comes up for the narrator at the same time as it comes up for the reader, you're golden.
I want to agree with that because one of the ways you can get away with anything is by having someone speak for the reader. In other words, you can get away with, that's a ridiculous idea, if someone is saying, that's a ridiculous idea, and somebody, you know, and gets an answer. You can have somebody bring up the reader's problems, and this is a perfect case of that. Because if the character is as surprised by the turn of events as the reader, that lets the reader relax, and get into the flow of it.
That's right, because the reader gets to look at that and say, oh, I wasn't supposed to know that. Okay, that's good. I will say, though, that if the situation is otherwise, as in the narrator is not surprised by this, that the narrator knew this all along, I think one of the writers to look to for how to do this is Zelazny, who was really good at it. And it's almost a matter of maintaining a kind of tone that says, yeah, I could tell you that, but, you know, I would have to shoot you. So, no. But keeping that sense of the narrator, no, the narrator isn't telling you everything. The narrator isn't entirely dependable, isn't entirely trustworthy, and the narrator is hip-pocketing something. So that's an idea also.
Well, also the right kind of narrator, you have the sense that the narrator is having fun with the narration.
True.
This is
which is really annoying and
Can I ask a question about that based on my narrator?
Sure.
Because my narrator is not at all like an untrustworthy narrator. One of her things she realizes about herself is that she is almost sometimes idealist to her own detriment. So she doesn't seem like a trickster or somebody who wants to hold secrets, but she's forced into that environment.
Yeah, an untrustworthy narrator is not necessarily intentionally untrustworthy. Narrators can be mistaken. You know, narrators can be a little incompetent, you know, in the sense that they may telling you the things as best they can and get to that crucial moment, which, you know, Steve may end up having to deal with, of the, oh, I should have told you this earlier. And if you do that sufficiently entertainingly, we'll forgive anything.
It's
cool.
true.
That's true. That's another one of those bottom line rules. If it's fun enough, you can get away with it. But yeah.
Yeah. I also wanted to say about the business of a story seeming like one thing and becoming another. I don't have a perfect example of that, but one of my favorite books is Robert Penn Warren's All the King's Men. And when you're first reading the book, you think the main character is the Huey Long character, and it's not. About I forget, a third of the way, halfway in, you suddenly discover that the book is about somebody, is actually about the narrator. You had thought it was not about the narrator, that the narrator was simply the person telling the story about someone else.
I remember that. You're right. That. Yeah. Looks like we have another question. Joe, is that helpful at all?
Yeah, that's a lot of good stuff to play around with. Thank you.
Okay, seriously?
Very welcome.
We helped somebody already?
You can now put that on the poster for this.
You know.
Our first satisfied customer.
Yay!
All right, Steen, you're up. What you got?
Hey y'all, thanks for hosting this. I hope this isn't too 101 for what we're dealing with here, but
nothing is too 101.
Oh, good to hear. So I'm currently working on my first novel, and first completed novel, and I'm running into the problem where I keep having cool ideas and shoving them in there, and the plot is getting overly complicated. I've got my tent pole set up. I know what happens near the beginning, middle, end, all the important bits, but I keep finding myself finding new pieces of the world as I write and wanting to go off on tangents. Short of, outlining, which is something that apparently I'm having trouble with as well. How do you keep yourself from just rambling? And how do you distinguish before you write what's going to be important to the story, so that you don't waste a bunch of time writing stuff that isn't relevant?
Well,
Okay.
sometimes, I mean, on the one hand, as long as you're writing something, it's not really irrelevant, because you go down that road, you go, oh, wrong road, turn around, come back, and at least you know not to go down that one again. So that's actually a positive discovery. But yeah, you don't really want to spend your time writing a 300,000 word novel, and you have to cut out like 2/3 of it and figure out, because it's a big tangle of story. So yeah, figuring out what that through line is going to be really useful. And even if you figure it out partway through, it's going to help you further on in the story, and it's going to help you with the revisions once you get to the end that you have already figured out there's going to be, because you've already figured out there's going to be an end, right?
Right.
Okay, good.
It's basically
How far into this are you?
I'm at about 60,000 words at this point. I'm shooting for 100.
Okay.
Feel like you're a little over halfway?
Yeah, it does feel about right.
In that case, I would consider those cool ideas you're getting as temptation, and my response to temptation is always to give into it.
That's true.
And unless you've got, if you find something that makes you go, oh God, that'd be so cool, run with it for now. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know if I have a rule here.
Story, but give in, surrender, go with the cool thing.
I want to say that the first draft is not the time to try to make it perfect. The first draft, in a lot of ways, is the time to really screw it up. In order to figure out how to get to what's perfect.
Because really, at the point at which you've more or less formed the entire story, it's a lot harder to screw up. So yeah.
And the first one is also the one in which you'll probably learn the most about writing. So you should feel free to make mistakes that you'll learn from. I can give you an example from my own first book, which is when I sat down to write it. I can't remember it well enough to be sure of the exact count, but I think originally it had 5 main characters, and in like the second or third draft, I realized that that they were getting in the way of each other, and I ended up throwing out a character. But had somebody told me to throw out the character while I was writing the first draft, I don't know what that would have done to my ability to keep going. I had to get that sloppy one done in order to look at it again analytically.
You did start off with enough characters to field a baseball team, yes.
Yeah.
I really like that book.
Another thing that might be useful is something that Will came up with, but I'm not going to let him talk about it because I'm going to claim it as mine and get all the credit. There are really 3 kinds of stories. And one of them is the plot, which is the events in order. That happened, then that happened, then that happened. And because that happened, that happened. There are also the relationship stories, and some of that is romance, but an awful lot of it is, what are the conflicts between the characters? Who's on whose side? What characters know what about each other? And then there's the third one, which is, how does the main character or main characters change? How do they transform? Right. If you think about those 3 characters, those 3 stories being part of your novel, you can look at them each individually and say, okay, where is that? There's the plot. Okay, I've got the plot going up here, and it's I've got all those elements in there that I wanted, but it's not quite, I don't know, I really want to go down this cool road where there's this thing that happens to these characters. And then you go down to the other stories and say, does that add to the relationship story? Does that affect the story in which one of the characters changes dramatically? And incorporate it in there if you think that it's going to make that story richer and contain more of those three kinds of tale.
That's a particularly interesting approach for what I'm doing, because what I'm attempting here is something along the lines of the first series of Twin Peaks, if you saw that, where
Oh, sure.
it begins as a murder mystery, and then partway through finding the killer, it turns out that the world is not what it seems, and the main character is not what he seems, and he finds out things about his past, et cetera, et cetera. So there's already a very strong interweaving of those three levels. So it's going to be challenging for me to sort of extract them mentally from each other.
And we are about with 5 minutes left.
Seriously, already?
I know.
Okay, hang on a second. Are we 2 for 2 here? Steen, was that helpful?
Very helpful. Thank you so much.
God.
Damn.
We have
That's
5 minutes. We have 5 minutes left to screw this up.
We have 5 minutes.
We better get on it.
Yeah, we've got one more. We've got Andre with a question. So you can try to screw up with that.
Okay.
We'll do our best.
That's
Okay.
right.
Andre, go
Can you
for
hear
it.
me, right? Cool. All right, so here's the deal. I've written a bunch of books, and they're in the queue for publication. And I recently wrote my first sequel, second book in the series, and I'm working on my second book in the series now. My question is about research, because I would really like to blow people away here. And the story involves a group
Make
of...
sure they're insured first.
Yes, okay. A group of people who are going into a new society that's been isolated, or it's an old society. It's been isolated for a long time. And I want to do some world building here, have some nice history for this, but I also want to set up some dominoes such that this group of characters is going to be a wrecking ball involuntarily for the society, and is going to just cause chaos with the ideas they're bringing in, the little bits of technology they're bringing in, and everything is going to be in an uproar, and they're going to have a very hard time getting what they came for. So what I'm wondering is,
really
where would
cool.
you suggest that I do some research to get some ideas for how this society could be set up to have just those kinds of disasters?
History.
Yeah, but I mean more specifically,
But
because
what-
history is
More
large.
Particularly
specific.
history, yes.
Well, I immediately think of the Russian Revolution, obviously.
Another possibility is Japan when it opened up to foreign visitors. What else we got?
Another one, and this is really controversial because not everyone agrees and it could be wrong, but another one is the effect of, okay, I've heard two different stories, but the traditional view, from what I know of most historians, is that they believe that it was the Spanish who introduced horses to the indigenous peoples of North America, and that was a huge technological change that affected everything. I've also heard contradictions to that, saying no, horses were already here. So it would take some work to dig into that.
It's worth researching. 2 people have recommended the book Guns, Germs, and Steel,
Oh, yeah,
which is
excellent.
also definitely a great book.
Yeah, I don't need it to be true. I just need it to be plausible.
Well, I know that.
Guns,
I
Germs, and
got
Steel will
that.
give you a
This
great
is
idea.
the definition of fiction writing.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about this question for me is you say this is going to be a sequel to a book that you've already done.
Right. Yeah.
And in the book that you've already done, do you have an analogous culture?
We meet 2 people from that culture who have traveled to Earth, but
Okay.
now the Earthlings are going there.
Okay, and how? And are they is this like essentially first contact for both of them? The first time that either world has encountered another world?
No, but the first time that either world has encountered that particular other world.
Okay, then let me suggest this. One of the places to look for research is in that first book you wrote, give it another careful reading and look for little stuff that you didn't notice really at the time you were writing it, but that make you go, oh, that could be really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, even hallmarks of one culture or the other that you didn't really think about specifically, and you think, okay, how important is that to the various people on either side, and what happens if you screw with it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
If tea is important to them, have your earthlings murder all the tea plants on accident.
One of the questions I would ask is who profits from things that they discover about each other? Because you may find
Follow the money, in other words.
well, yeah, but not just follow the money in the sense of follow of figuring out. It's more like anticipate where the money will go.
Mhm.
From the writer point of view, of sort of saying, all right, I've got these various factions, I assume, in each of these cultures. Who are the opportunistic ones? Who are the ones who accidentally discover that they now have an opportunity that never occurred to them? I can't be any more specific, I think, without more detail.
Okay.
And I think we're also out of time.
We
Yep.
definitely are. So was that helpful?
Yes,
Final-
thank you. That's some good resources and some food for thought. And
Well-
I'm not sure why Steen is accepting whiskey, but okay.
Oh yeah,
So,
yeah.
one of
Who
our
wouldn't
first
accept
questions.
whiskey?
These are our bribes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and the more of you who write,
How do I get a
who call
bribe?
in questions and have things that we can actually sound like we're solving, even if we're not solving, if it sounds like we're solving, then yeah, whiskey, PayPal, whatever, your check is in the mail.
Internet
Right.
points.
And if you expect a bunch of writers to send you checks, you are insane.
Dude, that's not the way the money flows.
No!
And
All right,
that's
this is
it.
awesome. Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, you have succeeded in wasting a half hour that you could have been writing.
And good luck.
Word Talk has been directed by Jenphalian, recording engineer Jennifer Slaugh, produced by Jen the Mermaid Princess in association with SQuirrelco Textbenders, Inc. Theme music was A Meaningful Dialogue, written by Neil Gaiman and performed by the Flash Girls. This has been a Pilkunnussija production. And don't read like my cousin.
Don't
Read like my cousin.